When Ron Paul was running for president of the United States, he had controversial views, caused a lot of people to dismiss him as out of touch or on the fringe or worse, and some things he is on the fringe on. It is unfortunately our loss that people, you didn't have to vote for him, but you should have listened to him. I don't agree with Ron Paul on everything, not by a long shot, but one thing I do agree with him on is the economy. And when you look back at this man's economic positions and you see the red flags that he was talking about, I mean years ago, you've got to give credit where credit is due. Now, what I'm wondering is, have the billions we've spent on the bailouts of Freddie and Fannie and AIG, is that even constitutional? The maverick himself, the actual maverick from the great state of Texas, Congressman Ron Paul. Congressman, help me out on this. Is this constitutional? I mean, I was sitting here watching the bailouts happen. The president's not there. It's just the Treasury Secretary and the Fed. And then a bunch of people are like they're going into a pawn shop. How much you give me for this?
I think your suspicions are correct. It's absolutely not constitutional, but the monetary system is unconstitutional, and these problems have been building for decades. So what Treasury did and what the Fed did is unconstitutional. The constitutional role is for Congress to regulate the money and its value, and they're totally neglectful. Well, but they didn't do anything about this. They're just sitting on the sidelines, sitting on their hands.
They're saying what Woodrow Wilson helped create of putting the Fed in here, that makes it constitutional. But if I read the Constitution, isn't Congress in charge of the purse strings? Only Congress can spend my money, right?
That is right, and they're getting around it this way. They spent $85 billion yesterday, and they say, well, it wasn't appropriated, we just created the money. But they're stealing value from your dollar by increasing the supply of money. They devalue your currency. You pay the tax by higher prices. And the whole process of appropriation and the Congress being responsible, totally neglectful. Right now, this week, I got to thinking, Congress ought to just go home. I think they're irrelevant if they don't take upon themselves the role that they're supposed to perform.
Do you think we're headed towards 1929, 1979, or a 1989-style Soviet collapse?
It could be the '89 Soviet collapse. It won't be the same, but the system will have to be revamped. And
how long do you think before? I mean, today is another anniversary. I had you on a couple of weeks ago, and you gave a speech, I don't know, 2 years ago, and you said, this is coming, and I had you on that anniversary of that speech, and you were dead right. I think today's another one where you said in 2003, you called again for things to happen, and that's what's happening this week. So how long before we see the real ramifications of this?
Well, if one understands Austrian economics, you can predict trends, but you can't predict precipitating events. You can tell when the foundation has eroded, and it has eroded. So the precipitating events that causes the panic is an emotional reaction, but the fundamentals are such that we're on the verge of a collapse. It could happen if we do something foolish or stupid, or continue to do the things that we're doing today by bailing out everybody any day and nationalize all our industry. Eventually, the world will give up on our dollar. We're still benefiting, believe it or not, with the privilege of issuing the reserve currency of the world. And now, so many people hold the dollar, they're cooperating with us on this fraud, and to the exclusion of the Congress. Congress neglects their responsibility. The Federal Reserve shouldn't even exist under the Constitution. There's no explicit authorization for a central bank, and the Treasury is just complicit in all that we do. Economic law will end this eventually.
I will tell you, Congressman, that while I'm not a conspiracy theorist by any stretch of the imagination, I will tell you that it almost feels like we're being set up by players that, for instance, the Secretary of the Treasury right now, he worked at Goldman Sachs. He was a big guy at Goldman Sachs. All of the players, they all know each other. It's the old boy network here, and they cannot be this stupid to not see what they're doing.
Well, I don't have the final answer on that because I'm bewildered by that too. You see them making a lot of money. They love the system. But I think what happens is they believe they can control it, you know, and they have this President's Working Group on Financial Markets, the Plunge Protection Team, and they're always believing they can be bailed out. But eventually the markets are more powerful than all those who do this planning, whether it's central economic planning through banking and monetary affairs. Eventually the market rules, and this is what's happening today. The market is shouting that you've overstepped your bounds and you can't do it any longer, so it'll bring us to our knees.
Congressman, the Democrats are saying this is Bush's problem, and, you know, the failed economics. The right is screaming this is Congress's problem, and the Democrats. I think it's both of their problems, but yet it's so much more than that, because this isn't seemingly getting very much attention connecting these two. Our politicians are saying one thing, but the rest of the news on TV is showing this is a global problem. This is happening all over the globe. Is that Congress's fault, too? Is that the president's fault? Did we cause it in the rest of the world? Or have the central banks done the same thing to the rest of the world?
No, the seeds were planted in 1913. They really came to bloom in 1971. It was made worldwide because we have a total fiat currency created by the Bretton Woods breakdown in 71. But the world accepted the dollar as the reserve currency of the world. It literally said you can print your gold as much as you want, so everybody's in bed together. So this idea that if you think the dollar is going down in value, that you can protect yourself by going to the euro or the yen, it's not going to work. Only hard assets will protect you because prices are going up. And the world economy is global. Global economies are good when they're market-driven, but when they're driven artificially by central banks colluding. So it's not just our central bank. All the central banks talk to each other, but we in the Congress can't even audit them. We don't even know this. That we can find out more information about the CIA, which is rather secretive, than we can about the Federal Reserve. And just like the other day when they came up with these bailouts, do you think they even consulted Congress?
No.
Spend $85 billion, and Congress just doesn't do anything. We're nationalizing these industries, and there doesn't seem to be that much concern.
Yeah. Well, there is here, Congressman. I'm going to take a quick break. We'll be back with some final thoughts with you in just a minute. Back now with Texas Congressman Ron Paul, who is a guy who has seen this financial situation coming for a very, very long time. I know that you're being tracked now. Finally, the media wants to talk to you, wants to hear from you, because everything that you've been talking about is now coming to fruition. It seems to me, Congressman, that we are ending up with bigger and even more powerful banks. We're losing everything small and retaining only thing that is very big, global, and powerful. How do we ever escape the global clutches of these gigantic financial institutions and the Fed when we are now handing them all of the power?
It's going to be very difficult unless we have a real serious discussion here in Washington where the mistakes were made and undo those mistakes and devise another system. It's going to continue that way, and the big guys are going to end up owning everything. You say, oh, no, it's the Federal Reserve, it's the taxpayer. But somebody's involved. Somebody's going to be controlling that. Somebody's going to be benefiting. You know, these CEOs aren't suffering. They're still getting their parachutes and their millions of dollars. So the big guys are protecting themselves. But eventually, always comes about. Monetary history shows that this type of a monetary system will not last, and eventually they have to sit down and devise a brand new system. The biggest question is, will it be in a free society or will it be in a totalitarian society? And right now, we're moving rapidly toward more government and bigger government and control by big banks and big corporations.
It is very frightening. Is this, you know, I said at the beginning of the show that I said, I don't know, about a year ago, one day, America, you're going to wake up on a Monday, and by Friday, your country will not be the same. This is not necessarily how I envisioned it, because I thought people would wake up by Friday. Is this that week, Congressman?
No, this is the preliminary. There'll be worse weeks to come, because the seeds have been planted. You say, what can you do to prevent the recession and the correction? You can't do anything. When you cause the problem of overinvestment, malinvestment, excessive debt, you can't solve the problem unless you do the liquidation, and that's the painful part that nobody wants to accept, and we haven't taken care of that problem. So unless we understand that and the people understand it, they won't know why we have to go through this problem.
Congressman, I've only got about 10 seconds. Yes or no, has anybody in Congress come to you that wasn't necessarily on your page and said, you know what, Congressman, don't tell anybody, but you were right?
More every day, but not
Good.
those in leadership yet.
Thank you very much. From New York, good night, America.